Fian Chen, a staff of the Taitung sugar factory, is a devout Buddhist, but his wife extremely opposed the husband's belief. Nonetheless, layman Chen did not retreat and still practiced diligently. On the other hand, he advised his wife, "Everyone with a mouth should recite Amitabha Buddha, and that is the grain reserves for us to be reborn in the West. But before birth in the West, we can also turn a mishap into good fortune and avoid disasters, which is of great benefit to us." Mrs. Chen has been influenced and transformed by her husband like that every day, but she still ignored it as if the east wind flows through a horse's ears. However, Mrs. Chen is a good housewife who is frugal in managing her family. Sometimes, she goes to the mountains to collect firewood and carry a large load of fagot, then takes the last small train back home. But once, Mrs. Chen carried the firewood down the mountain. Unwittingly, it was already sunset, and the last train had already set off. The small train in the mountains is for carrying sugar cane and not for picking up customers. So after the last train on the schedule had set off, all staff went home, and the whole station was empty. It was dusk at that time. Mrs. Chen was carrying a large load of firewood on her shoulder. She gathered her courage and decided to go home on foot. She followed the railroad alone and walked straight ahead in the center of the railroad. When walking halfway, she suddenly saw the black figure of a big man standing in the center of the railroad in front of her. The closer Mrs. Chen walked, the clearer the figure became. All the hairs of her body was erected. She was so frightened that she dropped the burden of firewood on her shoulder because she was unable to carry any more. On seeing the black figure alone at this dark night, Mrs. Chen suddenly thought of the king of mantras that she had been fumigated by her husband for several years, which was the most unpleasant phrase that she hated to speak. At the critical moment of life and death, standing there in fear, she had no choice but to put her palms together and chanted Namo Amitabha Buddha loudly. After she chanted a few minutes, the black figure of the man seemed to have stepped aside and gradually disappeared. Mrs. Chen saw that clearly, hurriedly stepped up her pace, and dropped the firewood. On her way home, Mrs. Chen kept chanting Namo Amitabha Buddha, but after walking for a while, she suddenly couldn't move her feet. At this time, Mrs. Chen wondered, "Why can't I lift my feet?" Mrs. Chen plucked up courage, bent down and touched the ground with her hands and realized that she had avoided another major disaster. It turned out that if she went one step further, there would be a big stream. She listened carefully. The water of the creek sounded very fast. At that moment, Mrs. Chen was even more grateful for Amitabha's compassion and blessing. If not for her immovable feet, she would have fallen into the creek and been swept away by the current. Her family wouldn't have known, and she would be resentful forever in the underworld. There was a small bridge made of wood planks across the creek. She crawled over it with both 2 hands and 2 feet like a dog, then Mrs. Chen could breathe a sigh of relief. She straightened up and ran forward again. 3 times in a row, each time near the bank of the creek, her feet automatically stopped. It was so incredible. Almost one step closer, she could drown or fall to death. Because of the darkness of the night, it had been midnight when she scrambled back home. The next day Mrs. Chen went back to pick up the firewood she had lost last night, and asked the staff at the station about the dark figure she had seen last night. They told her that there was once a man who died there after a terrible accident. It was likely that the ghost wouldn't dissipate and often frequented the area. The above story was told by Mrs. Chen in person when I attended the inauguration of the Taitung Lotus Society with a friend on January 1, 1959, and gave lectures for 5 days.